I'm just going to say it. Brad Underwood is the best coach in Fighting Illini history, and it's time to reward him for it.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. My name is Sunny Verma. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. A simple reminder, we are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Speaking of YouTube, we are oh so close to hitting that 1,000 sub mark. So if you're here and you're not subbed, do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button. I make Illini content daily, every single day for you. So if you'd like to help the show, it costs you guys nothing. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, send it to any friends that you think might find this content interesting. As always, I would love your feedback. I have a feeling that this one's going to have a lot of comments in that comment section. 90% of you will probably disagree. Just know that whoever takes the time to respond, I genuinely do appreciate. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Okay, today is going to be an episode that I know a lot of people are going to not like. Today's an episode where maybe 80 to 90% of you are probably going to disagree with me. And that's okay. That's the point of this show. I want to hear what you guys think. I want to hear you guys' feedback. So shortly after the season, I was inspired to write an editorial. And I never really got around to it because I wanted to really formulate my talking points and really wanted to wait till I was comfortable writing the article that I eventually did end up writing a couple days ago. And you'll be able to find it at armchairillini.com. I'll have the link in the description somewhere here. So if you want to reference it later, or if you want to read it while I speak, you can go ahead and do that. And the point of the article for me was that I think that Brad Underwood has done enough for the Illini program that I think that he is worth giving a lifetime contract. Hot take. I know. I get it. What I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to read this article, which again, you can find at Armchair Illini, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. It's time. Time for what? I'll get to that. The University of Illinois basketball team has had a whirlwind offseason. In March, Brad Underwood finally got the team into the Sweet 16 before they eventually succumbed in the Elite Eight to the eventual national champion UConn Huskies. And then the offseason began, of which there wasn't really one. Shortly after the season ended, the Illini announced the return of Orlando Antigua to Brad Underwood's staff, which had all of Illini Nation in a buzz. Orlando Antigua is a name not just familiar to Illinois fans, but one that is recognized throughout the country as one of the best recruiters and talent developers in the country. His list of recruits can be put up against almost anybody, including names like Karl Anthony Towns, Kofi Cockburn, Nerlens Noel, and Terrence Jones, just to name a few. Orlando has built enough of a reputation that he could get a job on almost any staff on any team in the country. Arguably, the biggest name in coaching, John Calipari, hired him away from Illinois and to the most prestigious basketball school just a couple years back. And Orlando had an open invitation to continue his relationship with John when he decided to move down to Arkansas. But he chose not to. Orlando Antigua chose Brad Underwood. And since that Orlando Antigua hire, the Illini have completely revamped their roster, bringing in 10 new players, including a couple young kids as talented as we've ever brought to Champaign. Will Riley is a 5-star basketball player who chose the Illini over blue bloods like Kentucky and Arizona. Kasparas Jakushonis is one of the most talked about players in Europe and chose to suit up for and play for the Illini this upcoming season. Both those players chose Brad Underwood. And in addition to those, Champaign has hosted various top players in the country, being involved with the elite teams in a battle for the best players. Which brings me to this. It's time to acknowledge the job Brad Underwood has done as the leader of this program. And it's time to establish to the rest of the country that Illinois basketball is serious about competing. It's time. It's time to give Brad Underwood a lifetime contract. Quite simply, the Illinois job is not an easy one. It comes with a lot of pressure from an erratic fan base that sometimes perceives itself to be in almost blue blood status, but without the results to show for it. Few can match the level of passion delivered by Illini fans, and with that sometimes comes overreactions over every occurrence, no matter how significant or small. And yet, Brad has now completed his 7th year as head coach and handled everything that the job comes with off the court masterfully. It was 4 years ago, after a successful 24-win season that we weren't able to see through because of the COVID cancellation, that Brad lost his 2 best assistants to Kentucky and his 3rd to Gonzaga. Many around the country proclaimed that this was showing that Illinois was simply a stepping stone destination and that success would always be fleeting in Champaign. But Brad Underwood did not flinch. Instead, the Fighting Illini won 20-plus games every season thereafter, and in that time won a conference championship and 2 Big Ten tournament titles. There isn't a coach in the Big Ten who has as many victories as Brad Underwood over the last 5 seasons. Brad has proven over and over again that he will continue to be a forward thinker and be willing to adjust to whatever it takes to win. Illinois has had some of their greatest recruiting seasons under Brad, and when it didn't result in the on-court success, Brad fully adjusted and jumped all in on the transfer portal. That decision led to the Illini winning 29 games last season and making an Elite 8 run while being one of the nation's most talked about teams. He's built successful teams around guards and been able to build teams around big men. And that brings me back to Orlando Antigua. The hiring of Orlando shows that the best talent in the coaching profession want to work with Brad Underwood. Between Orlando and Tim Anderson and Jeff Alexander, Illinois now employs one of the best recruiting trios in the nation. Keep in mind, it's been rumored that Tim Anderson has turned down $1 million plus offers to coach elsewhere because he wants to link himself to Brad. The best assistant coaches in the country recognize the benefits of working with Brad Underwood, and it's time the University of Illinois does too. He's proven himself worthy of becoming one of the few in the country to have that lifetime contract. Early in his career, Brad had a reputation as a job hopper, but now, at the age of 60, he may be at almost a tipping point where he may want to go ahead and declare once and for all that Champaign is his home for good. Josh Whitman needs to see this and see what he has in front of him and capitalize on the best move that he has made since being hired as athletic director at his alma mater, that being hiring Brad Underwood. Give Brad the lifetime contract so no longer will we have to hear rumors every time a job like Louisville or Memphis comes up. It's time to establish to recruits that Brad is here to stay and that Illinois is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the foreseeable and distant future. We got about 2 months left of baseball season, and if I plan on making it back to a Cubs game and back to Wrigley Field, I'm going to use the Game Time app. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I know that first segment's going to have a certain percentage of you angry at me and a certain percentage of you agreeing with me. So I wanted to bring on another intelligent voice. I could not find one, so I brought in one of the 12 best-looking college analysts in the world, Kent from Casual Big Ten. Kent, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. And I hope I can bring some intelligent takes. I know you got this week just jam-packed full of great guests, and I'm happy that you were able to, kind of squeeze me in amongst those men of college football and basketball. Thank you for having me.
Kent, you're always a pleasure. Kent, you heard my first segment. You're not an Illini fan. Let's be clear about that. I'm curious because I think you're going to be representing the majority probably on your side. I admit, hand up, that I'm probably representing the minority here. So what are your first initial impressions of me saying Brad Underwood and Illinois should join forces for a lifetime contract?
Yeah, well, first of all, I read it first and then heard you read it. So that was what a pleasure to hear the inflection instead of just like trying to guess what the inflection was. But I think that you bring up a lot of great points. I think that people that are outside of the Illinois basketball world would have some reasonable pushback on why Illinois wouldn't give Brad Underwood a lifetime contract. And but overall, if you're a fan of what he's done this year, which I think anybody that, follows the sport even casually would say that he's done a great job. Yeah, if he can continue up with this type of pace in the transfer portal and continue to make some deep runs in the tournament, it does seem like you would want to keep a guy like that around for a really long time.
And I wouldn't even say it's just this year, right? Like for me, it's the 7 years, the program that he took over. We started off struggling, but every year he's gotten the team better. As I talked about in the editorial, we built a team around guards. We've built a team around big men. We've built a team around high prospect like recruits, and we've built a team around transfers. There's other programs out there who wish that their coaches were willing to adapt and always be so forward thinking like Brad really is. And so I just think that right now we're kind of at the crossroads where, it could work out for both the University of Illinois and Brad Underwood. That's kind of the point of what I was trying to say with the editorial, that I think it's in the best interest of both sides to make it happen. But Kent, I think you have some examples of other guys who already have lifetime contracts. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just such an interesting term that I didn't even really know. I've heard that term thrown around before and guys getting lifetime contracts. So I was like, all right, when you sent me the article, I was like, how many guys actually have one right now? And there's really only three. It's Bill Self, obviously at Kansas, and then John Calipari and Tom Izzo right here in the Big Ten. Those are the only guys that I could find that actually have lifetime contracts with some, by the way, if you dig in a little bit, some ridiculous benefits, like awesome benefits that any of us would like kill to have. Like I was just reading through Calipari's right before I jumped on. Like he can get a membership at any golf course he wants in the area. Like that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in dues and fees. So anyways, but I wanted to dig just a little bit deeper though. And I think there's a few guys out there that we can kind of compare to the situation that Brad's in a little bit, because these are guys that basically have lifetime contracts because they have long ones. And it's Dan Hurley. We all know what happened this offseason. The Lakers were pursuing him. He ends up staying with UConn. He signed a 6-year deal. That's a long contract in college basketball. Mm-hmm. Tony Bennett just last month signed a 7-year deal with Virginia. And then Scott Drew, he's like borderline a really, really long contract, but I don't see him going anywhere from Baylor anyways, as long as he wants to stay. He's on the hook for 5 years right now. So those three guys, I thought it would be fun to kind of compare and contrast like those school situations with what you guys have with Brad. So like Dan Hurley, for example.
Yeah.
Like multiple national championships off the rip. And I think if I was being completely fair and unbiased, that's really kind of a baseline for guys that actually get a lifetime contract. And obviously Brad doesn't have that yet. So
I guess my argument here is Dan Hurley is clearly the best coach in college basketball. But Dan Hurley is also a guy who I think in 2 seasons, when Tom Thibodeau is ready to retire and the New York Knicks are looking to make their next hire, Dan Hurley is going to be packing his bags and going to the NBA. I don't know necessarily, because Dan is young enough where he may take that lifetime contract just for the security, but I don't think he would plan on honoring it on his side. Again, my initial intention with the editorial was I think it makes sense on both Brad's side and Illinois side. Dan Hurley, you're talking about, you can't even say a rising star anymore. He is a legitimate superstar in the sport. What he's done with UConn, they have a strong chance to go back to back to back this upcoming season. Obviously, when you're being courted by the Los Angeles Lakers, the premier franchise in the NBA, and let's be honest, the only reason he didn't take that job was probably because his wife wants to stay in the Northeast. And so, when that New York Knicks job opens up, I fully predict that Dan's going to take that job. Actually, Scott Drew and Baylor is probably the most similar to what I look at Brad Underwood and Illinois. I think, Baylor is good for Scott. Scott, wonderful for Baylor. I don't think Scott, even if he was offered better opportunities, is really at the place where he ever wants to leave. So I guess you can say in my editorial, if you took out Brad Underwood and just put Scott Drew's name in and took out Illinois and put in Baylor's, the point of my article would still stand.
Yeah.
And
I would have to ask, though, just one other question, just while we're on this topic. Those 6 guys I mentioned, the 3 that have a lifetime contract and the 3 that I just mentioned that are like kind of on the borderline of getting one or kind of already have one, they've all been to Final Fours before as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, having me on as a representative of someone that watches all the Big Ten, I think that Big Ten fans, when they see an article like that, that's going to be, I'll be honest, anybody outside of Illinois, the first reaction is going to be, dude hasn't even been to a Final Four yet. Like, how can you be talking about a lifetime contract? So what would be your response to that?
Ken, I'll tell you right after this.
Ooh.
Thank you for making Locked On Illini your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, the new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What a cliffhanger. What a great ending to that last segment, by the way. Okay, so the pushback that I'm giving you right now is that all 6 of the guys that I've mentioned they've all won a national championship, and, they've all been to Final Fours. Some of them multiple Final Fours. And I think that when people read the editorial, they're going to say, Brad hasn't even been to a Final Four yet. So what would be your response to that before we can give him a lifetime contract?
Well, for the record, I'm not Brad's agent, and there's no representation going on in that sense. For me, again, I think it's the trajectory of both the program and Brad's career. As I talked about, the best assistant coaches in the country want to come to Champaign. That's never really happened before. Illinois has always been a top 15-ish program in the country. Brad Underwood is making us a destination. We've basically put forth the NIL, bring in whatever kind of roster we want with the type of players that we want. And Brad Underwood, at least for the last X amount of years, again, I'm going to repeat, Purdue fans hate the stat, but for the past 5 seasons, no coach has won more games in the Big Ten than Brad Underwood. So for me, you're right, I get it, and I'm admitting that I might be a tad bit early in wanting to give the lifetime contract. But with where Brad is at his career, I find it obnoxious, when a job like Louisville opens up or a Memphis, like a basketball powerhouse who has money, you will always have Brad Underwood's name come up in the short list. And even though we're all pretty confident that Brad's not going to leave at this point, I just think that the job he's done in the 7 years that he's been the head coach at Illinois, now we've got, some of the top prospects in the country giving us official visits almost on a monthly basis, bring back a guy like Orlando Antigua, a rising star in the profession like Tim Anderson, turning down 7 figures elsewhere to stay with Brad Underwood. I think now we have the opportunity in Champaign to really stabilize the ship. Basically prove that, hey, we're not going anywhere. Brad is not young enough that he'd want to jump to another job, but also not old enough where all of a sudden, other coaches can negatively recruit against him saying, hey, Brad's not going to stick around very long.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to me, it sounds like more of like, let's get it solidified before anything great. Like let's say the Final Four happens this year and then some job offers start floating in. And then it's like, okay, well, we could have locked this up last off season. So I get what you're saying. I just feel like I don't know what is supposed to come first, the chicken or the egg, the Final Four or the lifetime contract or the national championship or the long deal. I don't know what happens first. I will say, though, to the credit of Illinois and the people that make these decisions, Brad Underwood is a top 10 paid coach. I know that has to make him feel a little bit better, a little bit more secure. I know that if I was making, almost $5 million a year, I wouldn't be making any sort of plans to go anywhere anytime soon. So, if they find any more money floating around Illinois and they want to bring somebody on just to do some scouting on the side, I would be happy to do that as well. I'd like to get paid a lot of money to do basketball stuff. That'd be fun. But to go back to my point, though, I do think that they're financially invested in him, and that's kind of their way of saying, hey, man, we do trust you, and we do want you here for a long time. Here's a bunch of money. Don't leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, he almost is at that level of the Scott Drew and Baylor, like official lifetime contract. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think it's kind of unspoken at this point. For me, I guess what I'm saying is let's just not make it symbolic anymore. Let's really, let the world know that, Brad Underwood is not leaving Illinois anytime soon, and that, Illinois has its utmost confidence in Brad. Brad doesn't have to worry necessarily about looking over his shoulder if he does struggle 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, totally. So what would it take this year then to get those types of fans, or shouldn't say it like that, but what would it take to get those fans that are, sometimes leaning negatively to get them to be like, hey, this is our guy forever now?
I mean,
does it have to be a national championship?
It would be a Final Four run. But the problem is, I don't know if this team, the one, coming up for next season, is primed for a Final Four run. It's a super young team. And you're talking about replacing 10 guys. Now, Kent, I know you are a subscriber to Locked On Illini, and you listen to this every single day. So you very well know my opinion that the following year's Illini team, with a year older, whether Kasper stays or Will Riley stays, Kerry Booth gets to develop a little bit, Kylan's a senior. I think that team has national champion aspirations. I think that team has astronomical ceiling. The one next year, right now, in my way too early, unofficial, official prediction, I have us in the Sweet 16 next season. So is that going to be enough for the more aggressive Illini fan? Probably not. Will they look at it as a step back from Elite 8 going down to Sweet 16? Probably. But again, I feel like I'm kind of looking big picture here, whereas other fans are just kind of, more year to year.
Well, the good thing about that is that all these shows are on the internet. They're going to live there forever. In 2 years, when you guys are hanging a national championship banner, you can bring this video back up, put it in everyone's face and say, I told you so. This is our guy. He's got to stay forever.
I like the way you think, Kent. Yeah. Otherwise, this can go really, really bad for me too in a couple of years. But That won't be the first prediction I get wrong. Kent, thank you so much again for joining me today. Let the folks here know where they can find you.
At Casual Big 10 on X. And I'm doing a little bit of YouTube stuff. I'm on and off with it. Sometimes I'm really excited about it. Sometimes I just don't do it for a week.
All right, Kent. We'll see you next week then.
All right, we'll see you.
There you have it. Another episode of Locked On Illini finished. Probably one of the more controversial ones I've recorded in a while. I'm very interested to see what the chat's going to look like. I'm predicting 80% of you are going to disagree with me and say that he's got to make it to another level, and maybe, what Kent said, make it to a Final Four or a national championship. Maybe 10% of you are going to agree with me and kind of understand where I'm coming from when it comes to the big picture. And the last 10% probably just clicked on this by accident. On your way out, if you don't mind, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I would sincerely appreciate it. I think this is the week that we make it to 1,000 subs. That's all I got for you today. I'll see you next time. ILL. Love you guys.